It was Wednesday, October 19th, 2016, just after 7 in the morning. North Oxford lay quiet under an autumn sky, the kind of stillness that suggests nothing more dramatic than commuters preparing for work and students shuffling toward lecture halls. But behind the tinted windows of a luxury penthouse in Summertown, one of the city's most affluent residential pockets, detectives from Thames Valley Police's Serious and Organized Crime Unit were preparing to move in. They had been watching this address for months, tracking a man whose lifestyle, high-end cars rotating through his garage, designer clothes piled in walk-in closets, cash flowing with no visible source, suggested something far removed from legitimate success. This wasn't entrepreneurship, it was evidence. Evidence of one of the largest, most methodically constructed cocaine distribution networks the region had ever encountered. The story that unfolded from that dawn raid would expose a vast, layered operation stretching from Albanian importation networks through British coordination hubs and into street-level dealing cells across the Midlands, the Southwest and London itself. It involved encrypted phones, hydraulic presses, bulletproof vests, hidden firearms, and nearly £500,000 in cash stashed inside false wall panels. This is the story of Khaled Uddin, Errol Mima, and Talant Stoica, three men who built empires on cocaine, believed they were untouchable, and watched those empires collapse under the weight of evidence they never saw coming. Before we go deeper into this investigation, subscribe if you love true crime documentaries that stick to verified facts and show you how real detectives work. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, I'd love to know. Now let's go back to where it all began. At first glance, Khaled Uddin looked like the picture of quiet success. Born and raised in Oxford, he had never drawn much attention growing up. There were no major brushes with the law, no scandals, nothing in his youth to suggest the trajectory his life would take. Locals in Summertown knew him primarily as the man who drove expensive cars through the area's narrow tree-lined streets. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Range Rovers, each one appearing for a few weeks and then vanishing, replaced by another equally expensive vehicle. He lived in Scholars Mews, one of North Oxford's most exclusive gated developments, in a top-floor penthouse that cost nearly £3,000 per month. Behind those secure gates, his garage often held a rotation of luxury vehicles, some on short-term lease, others borrowed, all of them far beyond what any known legitimate income could support. When officers from Thames Valley Police's Serious and Organized Crime Unit began to look closer, they found a man spending far more than he could possibly earn. In just a few months, Uddin had blown over £62,000 on luxury car rentals and property leases alone. That kind of expenditure demanded explanation, and none was forthcoming. The tip-offs were small at first, an offhand remark from a neighbor about his cars, a quiet question raised by property management about his source of funds. But they were enough to trigger interest from detectives already monitoring drug movements between Oxfordshire and the Midlands. Intelligence analysts began pulling phone records, vehicle registration data, and financial transaction logs. What they found didn't add up. Uddin had no declared business, no employer, no investment portfolio, yet cash flowed through his life as if he were running a successful enterprise. But the money trail didn't end with him. As detectives dug deeper, they realized Uddin wasn't acting alone. He was part of something much bigger, something structured and sophisticated, something that demanded a coordinated response. What Thames Valley Police uncovered through months of surveillance and intelligence gathering was not a loose association of street dealers, but an organized, layered distribution system built to move high-purity cocaine across multiple regions with minimal risk of detection. At the top of the chain was an Albanian-led import network headed by Errol Mima, a quiet, methodical figure who oversaw the flow of cocaine shipments arriving into Europe and onward into the United Kingdom. Mima's operation functioned less like a criminal gang and more like a logistics company, with defined roles, strict communication protocols, and a clear hierarchy. Immediately below that tier was a United Kingdom-based coordination layer, and this is where Khaled Uddin operated. He acted as the national coordinator, the man who matched incoming shipments to regional networks, managed the onward flow to street-level gangs, and ensured that cash moved back up the chain to the importers. The structure was straightforward in concept, but sophisticated in execution. Cocaine shipments moved from Albania, or via Albanian-controlled routes in Europe, into the United Kingdom's internal markets, typically via London and onward distribution networks. Couriers brought kilogram blocks to a set of trusted intermediaries who used Oxford as a staging post before consignments were relayed to the West Midlands, the South West, and local Oxfordshire dealers. Oxford's geographic position, sitting neatly between London and Birmingham, linked by the M40 motorway, made it the perfect hub for moving drugs across the country. The gang relied on a mixture of low-tech concealment and higher-end counter-surveillance. Vehicles were adapted with hidden compartments designed to carry both drugs and cash, allowing couriers to crisscross county lines with reduced risk of detection during routine traffic stops. The organization used multiple burner phones, often cycling through them weekly, and maintained a catalogue of anti-surveillance equipment to frustrate conventional policing techniques. Investigators later found around 40 mobile phones across linked addresses, an indicator of compartmentalized communications rather than casual use. Each phone served a specific purpose, one for inbound supplier contact, another for regional distributors, yet another for coordination with money handlers. In essence, the network ran like a well-oiled business, and one of its biggest clients was waiting in the Black Country. Among Khaled Uddin's network of regional distributors, one of the most organized and profitable operated from the Black Country, a tight-knit 5-man crew based in Kings Winford. Their operation was small in number, but vast in reach, responsible for flooding large areas of the West Midlands with high-purity cocaine. At the top of this group was Craig Davies, then 29 years old, a well-connected local dealer already known to police for his involvement in high-level drug supply. He had previous convictions for Class A trafficking and now acted as the central link between Uddin's Oxford operation and the Midlands street market. Davies managed finances, distribution routes, and client contacts, treating his trade like a tightly run business with profit margins, supply schedules, and risk management protocols. Alongside him was David Stokes, a 31-year-old electrician and father of 2 from Kidderminster. Stokes functioned as Davies's right-hand man, coordinating storage locations, arranging transport, and overseeing deliveries. Even after arrests began within their circle, Stokes and Davies continued to push forward with shipments, determined to keep the cash flowing despite mounting pressure from law enforcement. Supporting them was James Bishop, 33, another electrician from Stourbridge, who served as a trusted courier. Surveillance footage later showed Bishop traveling to Oxford on multiple occasions, where he met directly with Uddin or his associates for exchanges of either drugs or cash. For his role, he earned several £100s per trip, but unknowingly became a vital piece of evidence in linking the Midlands gang to Uddin's wider network. Jamie Green, 36, from Kings Winford, operated closer to the street level. He oversaw redistribution, moving product from wholesale quantities to mid-tier dealers who would further dilute and divide it for street sale. Green's arrest came moments after one such exchange. Officers found a kilogram of cocaine concealed under his tracksuit top, another £11,000 worth in his car, and £5,500 in cash hidden inside his home. The youngest member, Callum Bradley, 30 years old, from Ashwood Marina, joined the network later, stepping in after earlier arrests had disrupted the flow. His job was to handle local runs and short-distance transfers between drop points, helping to keep the supply chain running smoothly, even as police pressure intensified. Their base of operations was Stallings Lane in Kings Winford, a quiet and unsuspecting residential stretch that masked a busy trafficking hub. Each kilogram of cocaine was purchased for around £35,000 from Uddin's Albanian contacts, and later resold across the region for more than £100,000. Once divided and diluted, the purity ranged from 60% to 91%, making their product some of the strongest available on local streets. Despite operating for only a few months, their network was highly structured, more business-like than chaotic. They used staggered cash payments to avoid large, traceable transactions, made sure money and drug exchanges rarely happened at the same time, and maintained coded communication to reduce exposure. To investigators, the Kings Winford gang represented the perfect middle tier of Uddin's empire, efficient, disciplined, and immensely profitable. Evidence gathered from their operations later proved crucial in unraveling Operation Stingray, revealing how deeply the Black Country crew was embedded in a web that stretched from London to Cornwall. When the dust settled, it became clear the King's Winford crew wasn't just another regional gang. It was the backbone of Uddin's national supply chain, the engine that turned imported cocaine into street-level profit. By mid-2016, investigators within Thames Valley Police's Serious and Organised Crime Unit were already seeing fragments of something much larger than a local supply ring. Intelligence from financial monitoring units, vehicle stop data, and community reports all pointed toward an organised movement of cocaine through Oxford and beyond. Bank accounts showed unexplained deposits. Vehicle registration checks revealed luxury cars leased under false names. Tip-offs from informants described meetings in car parks, quick exchanges, and men who lived far beyond their declared means. To connect the fragments, they launched a dedicated probe, Operation Stingray. The scale of the operation reflected the challenge they faced. More than 120 officers were drawn in from across Thames Valley Police, working in coordination with the National Crime Agency and regional forces in the West Midlands and Metropolitan Police areas. The mission was clear but far from simple. Identify, trace, and dismantle the network, moving vast quantities of high-purity cocaine across southern and central England. Undercover teams began tailing Uddin's vehicles, high-end cars that moved constantly between Oxford, Birmingham, Bristol, and London. Officers began noticing patterns. The same cars appeared at quiet car parks at specific times. The same people met briefly and left in opposite directions. Each meeting lasted only minutes with quick exchanges of bags or envelopes. Nothing about it was random. Surveillance units installed discrete cameras at strategic points across Summertown and Cowley, capturing Uddin's movements in and out of properties later identified as storage or counting locations. Closed-circuit television footage soon showed him meeting both Albanian couriers and Midlands buyers, transferring packages, and returning to his flat with plastic bags later found to contain cash. What emerged was the visual thread linking two previously separate investigations. One focused on local money laundering, the other on cross-regional cocaine trafficking. A defining moment came outside a Starbucks cafe in Summertown, a location that would later become central to the prosecution's case. Surveillance officers observed Uddin, codenamed Subject 1 in internal reports, meeting with Errol Mima, logged as Subject 5. Both men exited together, phones in hand, sending messages within seconds of leaving. To police analysts, that single frame of footage confirmed what had long been suspected, that the Oxford hub and the Albanian importation tier were directly connected. From there, Operation Stingray shifted gears. Analysts built detailed link charts mapping phone calls, financial transfers, and vehicle journeys. Every meeting, message, and route was plotted to map the upper and lower tiers of the conspiracy. The objective became clear: one coordinated strike that would take down the national coordinator, Khaled Uddin, and the importer who supplied him, Errol Mima, in a single operation. The planning took weeks. Officers rehearsed entry procedures, prepared evidence seizure protocols, and coordinated with forensic teams to ensure nothing was missed. By mid-October, they were ready. At dawn on the 19th of October, 2016, after weeks of surveillance and months of intelligence gathering, dozens of officers from Thames Valley Police and the National Crime Agency fanned out across multiple counties. Their target list covered 12 properties, each one linked to the network through phone records, financial data, or direct observation. The most significant address was the top-floor apartment at Scholars Mews in Summertown, home to Khaled Uddin. In the early morning darkness, the silence was broken by the sound of a battering ram striking the penthouse door. Officers moved in with precision, sweeping through rooms, securing suspects, and beginning the methodical search that would uncover the full scale of Uddin's operation. Once the search started, it was clear this was no ordinary apartment. Behind wardrobes and inside sealed cupboards, investigators uncovered bundles of cash hidden within false panels and box storage compartments. When counted, the total reached £460,000, the largest single cash seizure in Thames Valley Police history at that time. But it was just the start. Officers found a bulletproof vest, anti-surveillance equipment including signal jammers and counter-tracking devices, and dozens of designer items, 70 pairs of jeans, each priced between £500 and £700, still with tags attached. Expensive watches and jewelry were scattered among them, clear signs of wealth with no lawful origin. From another linked address, officers seized a 10-ton hydraulic press capable of processing and repackaging kilogram blocks of cocaine into saleable weights. Forensic examination later confirmed it had been used extensively to prepare cocaine for distribution, with residue traces matching samples seized during earlier arrests. The same morning, simultaneous searches across Oxfordshire and the West Midlands yielded another £90,000 in cash, bringing the total seized to £560,000. The sheer scale of the money convinced detectives they had reached the network's financial core. Forensic teams moved in to catalogue and trace everything. Fibers, DNA, and microscopic residues from the bundles of cash were analysed using advanced forensic techniques. The results were decisive. Links were found between the seized currency and vehicles used by known couriers connected to the operation. The evidence bridged the gap between Uddin's lifestyle and the broader trafficking network he coordinated. Over 10 kilograms of high-purity cocaine was seized as part of the wider probe, and subsequent financial investigations estimated the group's criminal benefit in the region of millions of pounds, figures that aligned with recovered cash and the lifestyle evidence gathered at the properties. By the end of the operation, 13 people were arrested across Oxfordshire, the West Midlands, and London. The raid had delivered what the months of surveillance had promised: irrefutable proof of organised crime hidden in plain sight. But the investigation revealed something even more concerning than the cocaine network itself. The firearms link surfaced in August 2016, 2 months before the coordinated raids, when surveillance officers in the West Midlands began tracking a meeting in a Kings Winford car park. The operation had been quietly flagged after intelligence suggested that a weapons handover was planned between two men already known to police. One was Sadakat Ali, a figure with ties to Oxford's drug circuit. The other, Gerald Simpson, a former guardsman suspected of sourcing illegal weapons through his military contacts. Undercover officers watched as both vehicles pulled into the car park and parked side by side. Ali took a small shoebox from Simpson and placed it in the rear of his vehicle before driving off. Moments later, the convoy was intercepted. Both cars were boxed in by unmarked units and searched under warrant. Inside Ali's vehicle, officers discovered an Adidas shoebox containing 2 9mm pistols and 12 rounds of ammunition. Beneath the driver's seat was an envelope holding £2,000 in cash, payment, investigators believed, for the weapons. The guns were later identified as self-loading pistols, fully functional and ready for use. As digital analysis followed, detectives traced a series of calls made in the hours surrounding the exchange. The numbers led back to Khaled Uddin. He hadn't been physically present at the handover, but phone data showed repeated contact between Uddin and Ali before and after the meeting. The pattern was enough for prosecutors to argue that Uddin was pulling the strings from a safe distance, coordinating the acquisition of firearms to protect his drug operation. This discovery added a new dimension to the case. It wasn't just about drugs and money laundering anymore. The network had access to firearms, which meant the potential for violence was real. By the summer of 2017 at Birmingham Crown Court, Khaled Uddin faced multiple charges: 2 counts of conspiracy to supply cocaine, 1 count of money laundering, and 1 count of conspiracy to transfer firearms and ammunition. The prosecution laid out the case with overwhelming evidence: surveillance footage, phone records, financial analysis, forensic traces linking cash to vehicles, and testimony from officers who had spent months building the case. When the verdict came, the outcome was decisive. Uddin was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 16 years imprisonment for the drug and money laundering charges, with an additional 14 years for firearms offences ordered to run concurrently. The combined judgment marked the end of his operation and the collapse of a key tier in the wider supply chain. Financial investigators pursued the profits under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Uddin's criminal benefit was assessed at £2,016,016, with £541,334 recoverable through seized assets and cash. If unpaid, he faced an additional 5 years in default. But the sentencing didn't end with Uddin alone. One by one, the other members of the network were brought before the court, a full chain of distributors stretching from Oxford to the Black Country and beyond. Craig Davies, 30 years old, of Murdoch Drive, was jailed for 15 years and 6 months for his role as the Midlands coordinator. David Stokes, 31, of Tennyson Way, received 14 years and 6 months for his part in the conspiracy. Jamie Green, 35, of Water Street, was handed 9 years and 4 months. James Bishop, 33, of Vicarage Road, Stourbridge, was sentenced to 8 years. Callum Bradley, 31, from Ashwood Marina, was given 3 years and 8 months. Steve Hutchison, 27, of Bracknell, was sentenced to 9 years and 6 months. Yai, 39, from Edgware in London, received a 10-year jail term. Elsid Kopani, 28, was jailed for 9 years, while Emil Karmi, 32, was given 7 years. Emre Kazar, 35, from Streatham, was handed 4 years and 6 months, the same sentence received by Araldo Karmi, 23. Finally, Lewis Edge, 30, of Cornwall, was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison. Together, the gang received a combined total of more than 150 years in prison. As Uddin's distributors faced trial, the investigation was already reaching higher levels. The same intelligence that exposed his network now pointed to the man supplying it, the figure at the very top of the chain. At the top of the chain sat Errol Mima, an Albanian national who had lived quietly in Oxford and Beaconsfield, maintaining a low profile while overseeing one of the most sophisticated cocaine importation operations in the region. Mima's position was confirmed through months of covert monitoring. Cell site analysis placed him in constant contact with Uddin and Elsid Kopani, another Albanian operative who handled regional logistics. The footage presented later in court would become one of the clearest pieces of evidence linking the Albanian and British arms of the organization. From June to December 2016, Mima's network functioned like a business, with a corporate-style hierarchy that included communication handlers, trusted couriers, and regional agents operating under tight control. Mima's operation didn't just import drugs. It managed an entire wholesale economy of cocaine, supplying groups in Birmingham, the Black Country, and as far west as Bristol. His lieutenants, including Khaled Uddin, Elsid Kopani, and money launderer Michael Palmer, kept the system moving with precision. Mima himself rarely touched the product. His role was strategic. He coordinated shipments from European suppliers, ensured safe passage into the United Kingdom, and managed the financial flows that kept the operation running. During Mima's 2-month hearing at Oxford Crown Court in 2018, jurors watched hours of surveillance footage showing the meetings, the coded phone calls, the careful choreography of a man who believed he was insulated from prosecution. The evidence left little room for doubt. Phone records showed him in contact with known importers in Albania and distributors across England. Financial analysis revealed money transfers that matched the timing and amounts of drug deliveries. Surveillance footage placed him at key meetings where shipments were discussed. The verdict found Mima guilty on 2 counts of conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison, one of the longest terms handed down for such offences in the region. The financial side of the case told a different story. Although police proved the network had laundered millions, the Crown Prosecution Service only moved to seize £14,380, an amount Judge Ross described as risible given the scale of the operation. The court ruled that Mima had benefited by £71,680, but only that small sum could be recovered from traceable assets. If he failed to pay, he would serve an extra 3 years and 6 months, a light penalty compared to the scale of his profits. Years later, the case resurfaced for another reason. In 2023, Mima was among dozens of Albanian offenders transferred back to Albania to serve their sentences under a United Kingdom-Albania prisoner return agreement designed to ease prison overcrowding. Under Albanian penal rules, his 25-year British sentence was reduced to roughly 15 years, aligning with their domestic maximum for narcotics offences. Local media in Tirana later called him the Lord of Cocaine, a title that reflected both his reach and the legend that had grown around his case. Even with Uddin and Mima jailed, another Albanian network was already rising, this time behind the facade of a London cafe. Talant Stoica appeared to be a devoted family man, a father of 4 who had built a quiet life in the United Kingdom. On Lear Bridge Road in Walthamstow, he ran the Milano Cafe, a modest spot where locals dropped in for coffee and pastries. To anyone passing by, it looked ordinary, just another Albanian-run cafe in East London. But to detectives, it would soon reveal itself as the center of something far more serious. Before arriving in Britain, Stoica already had a history with European law enforcement. Court records from Italy showed he was accused of smuggling heroin between the Netherlands and Italy from December 2015 to February 2016. When that investigation tightened, he vanished, resurfacing quietly in the United Kingdom under a false name, where he opened the cafe as a front. Behind the counter, the real business ran with precision. The Milano Cafe was more than a coffee shop. Couriers came and went, cash was exchanged, and Stoica sent out instructions using encrypted phones. Surveillance later confirmed that Stoica used the back office to direct multi-kilogram cocaine shipments, moving money through trusted Albanian channels and coordinating deliveries across London and Bristol. Bank records told another story. His account showed deposits far beyond what a small cafe could generate, and his phone linked repeatedly to known figures in organized crime. To the public, the cafe was a harmless local spot, but in reality, it was a cover, the front door to one of London's most discreet Albanian trafficking networks. By 2020, Talant Stoica's quiet operation was thriving under the radar until a global breakthrough changed everything. That year, law enforcement agencies in Europe and the United Kingdom cracked EncroChat, a supposedly secure encrypted communication platform used by thousands of criminals across the continent. The platform had long been considered unbreakable, offering end-to-end encryption, remote wipe capabilities and anonymized user identities. But in a joint operation led by French and Dutch authorities, law enforcement managed to install a technical implant that allowed them to intercept messages in real time before they were encrypted. In Britain, the investigation was codenamed Operation Venetic, led jointly by the National Crime Agency and the Metropolitan Police. Stoica's alias on the platform was Pale Fog. For months, he had used it to arrange shipments, track payments, and give precise delivery instructions, all under the belief the system was unbreakable. But investigators were watching every word. Analysis of Stoica's EncroChat data painted the full picture of his operation. Messages recovered showed him ordering cocaine shipments between London and Bristol, worth around £1.4 million. He discussed drop-off times, payment arrangements, and updates on deliveries in language that prosecutors later described as the logistics of a criminal business. His communications also exposed his immediate circle. Mohammed Kosia, 30 years old, acted as his main runner, the one who collected packages and moved them between drop points. Eduard Hajini, 39, worked as a courier, ensuring the cash reached the right hands and shipments left on time. Sokol Jazaj, 36, was the driver and assistant, managing vehicle routes and providing cover during transfers. The EncroChat transcripts showed Stoica giving direct orders to each of them, sending postcodes, times, and payment confirmations from the comfort of his cafe office. What he didn't know was that every instruction was already in police hands, building a case that would prove impossible to defend against. The EncroChat leaks gave police everything they needed, coded references that now translated into addresses, names, and delivery schedules across London. Surveillance teams moved quickly, turning months of intelligence into coordinated raids. In October 2020, officers from the Organised Crime Partnership, a joint unit of the National Crime Agency and the Metropolitan Police, began tailing Mohammed Kosia, Stoica's main runner, through the streets of Ilford, East London. The operation ended when unmarked cars boxed in his vehicle during what appeared to be a routine drive. Inside, officers discovered £23,000 in cash, a loaded handgun with 20 rounds of ammunition, and 11 kilograms of high-purity cocaine valued at more than £1.1 million. When they searched his home, They found that the drugs had been stored in a shocking location, hidden beneath his baby's cot, a detail that underscored the recklessness and moral detachment of those involved. Kosia was immediately arrested, later admitting possession with intent to supply and firearms offenses. The investigation didn't stop there. In April 2021, Stoica's other associates, Edward Hajini and Sokol Jazaj, were stopped while driving from London to Bristol. Their vehicle contained 1 kilogram of cocaine, but a subsequent search of a nearby garage revealed 3 additional kilograms. Evidence also tied Hajini to an earlier delivery of 2 kilograms, bringing the total value of drugs linked to the pair to more than £360,000. Both men were arrested and later charged with conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. 2 months later, on the 30th of June 2021, the operation reached its peak. Armed officers arrested Talant Stoica near his home in Bexley Heath, Kent. He was found carrying 3 mobile phones and £4,000 in cash, with another £12,000 hidden inside his house. The raid marked the end of a man who had once believed his encrypted communications made him untouchable. Faced with overwhelming evidence from EncroChat and surveillance, Stoica pleaded guilty to 3 counts of conspiracy to supply cocaine and 1 count of money laundering. His arrest was described by the Organized Crime Partnership as a major blow to Albanian-led drug trafficking in the capital. In February 2022, the final chapter of the investigation played out inside Woolwich Crown Court. Stoica stood before the judge, charged with 3 counts of conspiracy to supply cocaine and 1 count of money laundering. The evidence was overwhelming. EncroChat transcripts, surveillance footage, financial records and testimony from undercover officers who had spent months building the case. The court also heard how Stoica had an outstanding Italian extradition warrant related to the earlier heroin smuggling allegations. That background confirmed to prosecutors that Stoica's British operation wasn't an isolated scheme. It was part of a wider European trafficking network with roots stretching back years. After sentencing, officials from the Organized Crime Partnership said the case showed how targeting those higher up the supply chain has a significant local impact, disrupting not just individual dealers, but entire distribution systems. Talant Stoica was sentenced to 10 years in prison, marking the end of his operation. Alongside him, Mohammed Kosia received the same term, 10 years behind bars. Edward Hajini was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment, while Sokol Jazaj was handed a 5-year sentence for his role in the conspiracy. The Milano Cafe was shut down, its front as a legitimate business permanently dismantled. The cases of Khaled Uddin, Errol Mima, and Talant Stoica represent more than just successful prosecutions. They illustrate the evolution of organized crime in the United Kingdom over the past decade. What began as loosely connected street-level dealing operations in the early 2000s had, by the mid-2010s, transformed into sophisticated hierarchical networks modeled on corporate structures. These groups used encrypted communications, counter-surveillance techniques, and compartmentalized roles to insulate leadership from prosecution. The Albanian connection was central to all 3 cases. Albanian organized crime groups have become dominant players in the European cocaine trade, leveraging established smuggling routes from South America through the Balkans and into Western Europe. Their operations are characterized by discipline, violence when necessary, and a willingness to invest in infrastructure, hydraulic presses, secure communications, false front businesses that gives them an operational advantage over less organized groups. Oxford's role as a trafficking hub was no accident. The city's location, equidistant from London and Birmingham, and connected by major motorways, made it ideal for coordinating regional distribution. Its affluent neighborhoods provided cover for criminals who could blend in by displaying wealth, and its transient student population meant that unusual comings and goings attracted less suspicion. The success of Operation Stingray and Operation Venetic also highlighted the importance of interagency cooperation. The National Crime Agency, Thames Valley Police, the Metropolitan Police, and regional forces in the West Midlands worked together, sharing intelligence, coordinating surveillance, and pooling resources. Without that collaboration, these cases would likely have remained fragmented local investigations rather than comprehensive takedowns of national networks. The EncroChat breakthrough was a turning point. For years, criminals had believed encrypted platforms offered total security, allowing them to operate with impunity. The ability of law enforcement to crack that encryption and intercept messages in real time fundamentally altered the risk calculus for organized crime. Thousands of criminals across Europe were arrested in the wake of the EncroChat takedown, and the psychological impact, knowing that secure communications were no longer secure, continues to reverberate through criminal networks. Yet despite these successes, the drug trade continues. For every network dismantled, another rises to take its place, often learning from the mistakes of those who came before. The financial recovery in these cases was limited. While millions were proven to have been laundered, only a fraction was ultimately seized. That money, now hidden in offshore accounts, property investments, or cash buried in unknown locations, remains a draw for those willing to take the risk. The human cost is harder to quantify. Every kilogram of cocaine distributed by these networks fed addiction, fueled violence, and devastated communities. The high-purity product moved by Uddin's and Stoica's operations was particularly dangerous, contributing to overdoses and long-term health crises among users. The firearms connection in Uddin's case added another layer of harm, showing how drug trafficking networks and weapons supply are often intertwined. For law enforcement, these cases serve as both success stories and cautionary tales. They demonstrate that with patience, coordination, and advanced investigative techniques, even the most sophisticated criminal networks can be dismantled. But they also reveal how quickly new networks emerge, how difficult it is to recover criminal profits, and how global the drug trade has become. The story of Khaled Uddin, Errol Mima, and Talant Stoica is not just a story of three men. It's a story of systems, networks, and the ongoing battle between those who enforce the law and those who seek to profit by breaking it. It's a story that continues to unfold in cities across the United Kingdom and Europe, where the next operation, the next raid, the next EncroChat is always just beginning.